High school student Kanazawa Nobuaki transfers into a new school and tries to distance himself from his new classmates. At midnight, Nobuaki receives a text from someone called the King outlining the rules of the King's game. Every student must participate and follow the instructions or face death. Nobuaki is ordered to kiss Honda Natsuko. Every student in class, who all receive the text, think Nobuaki is joking. Nobuaki tries to explain the game is real, making most of them angry at him. Nobuaki, who has played the game before, decides to break the rules and die, meaning Natsuko will also die. As the 24-hour deadline approaches, Nobuaki waits to die only for Natsuko to appear, confess her love and kiss him with seconds to spare. Nobuaki realizes several people from class had received different instructions and rushes to find the other students with instructions. He is too late as he finds several of them have hanged themselves in their bedrooms. The surviving students, realizing the game is real, accuse Nobuaki of being the murderer. One of the students, Sadayu Uechi, receives a punishment text for breaking a rule and immediately bleeds to death. Natsuko realizes she was instructed to have sex with Teruaki Nagata and panics. Nobuaki insists Natsuko and Teruaki must decide for themselves what they will do. Nobuaki has flashbacks to the first time he played the game and how his classmates immediately turned on each other after realizing the game was real. He insists his new class must work together to survive the instructions, no matter what they are. Teruaki, desperate not to die, attempts to rape Natsuko. Natsuko suddenly overpowers Teruaki and becomes cold and hostile, having used the attempted rape to try force Nobuaki to reveal the secret to escaping the game, since he had survived it before. She swears she will survive no matter what and almost rapes Teruaki before pulling Nobuaki away from everyone else and criticizing his intention to try and save everybody instead of focusing on his own survival. She loudly accuses him of trying to rape her himself, turning the whole class against him. She then tries to convince Mizuki, who received an instruction to text the word die to two other students, which would result in their death, to send the text to Nobuaki. Akamatsu Kenta happens to see his classmates and Nobuaki gather at Bunko Park, but then he sees that Nobuaki was hurt and accuses the class of beating up Nobuaki. Annoyed, Natsuko tries to convince Mizuki to send die to Kenta and Nobuaki, but she refuses and smashes her phone on the floor, breaking it. Kenta then carries Nobuaki to the hospital and a terrified Mizuki comes along. Then, Mizuki, Kenta and Nobuaki all went to a deserted area where Kenta was assigned by the king to give an order to a classmate and they must follow it. He decides to give himself the order to protect Mizuki's life, to make her feel better. Then Nobuaki tells Kenta and Mizuki about another flashback of another of his classmates dying because they lost a popularity voting contest. Meanwhile, Natsuko picks up the phone Nobuaki dropped. Nobuaki tells Kenta and Mizuki about a distant village, Yonaki, where the king's game was originally played, and they start traveling to Yonaki to get more information to end the game. On the lengthy train ride, Nobuaki has another flashback where he deduced the king is someone in his class, and his classmate Nami, who had to give herself an order, takes the device and orders herself to touch the king. When she touches the king, a confirmation text will be given, confirming their identity. Ria, a mysterious girl in class, states she is the king and asks if the class will kill her, since that would end the game. However, when she takes Nami's hand and touches herself with it, there is no confirmation text. Despite touching everyone in the class, nothing happened. That night, Nobuaki finds Nami to comfort her. Nami then gets a punishment to go blind, along with a taunt from the king that they were in the class and the only way to find their identity was to hate each other. Nobuaki gets an order to lose something important. He tries to break all his possessions in his house, even break up with Chimi, but his attempts were futile. Finally, he completed his order when Nami decided to help him by drowning herself. Ria calls Nami stupid for killing herself even though her punishment wasn't death. She repeats she is king, stating that since she made Nami touch her instead of letting her do it herself, it was not considered valid. However, Nobuaki still doesn't kill her. After tasing him, she scolds him for his lack of resolve, stating she isn't actually king but wants to enjoy the king's game, which will be difficult to do if Nobuaki is so boring, and beat the king. Later, his classmate Yasuke begins doing research and finds information about the king's game, including the fact each classmate got a one-character text from the king before their death, and that the game was played 30 years ago in a village called Yonaki. Yasuke then dies, amongst almost half the class who broke the latest rule to not to do anything unnecessary, which was crying, deduced by Nobuaki. While waiting for the train to the village, Nobuaki gets hit in the head and wakes up in a room with his hands tied. Kaori accuses Nobuaki of being the king and killing Yasuke. Nobuaki explains the situation and tells Kaori Yasuke likes her and he told Nobuaki to protect her if anything happened to him. His words cause Kaori to cry and she dies for breaking the rule. A new order was given in which one student has to roll a die and name the number of students equal to the number rolled. The student who rolled the dice in those they named would all be punished. After a heated discussion culminating in Toshiyuki Abe threatening to kill Chimi, Naoya steps up to roll the die. He rolled a 6 and all the remaining classmates ended up dying, except Nobuaki, Chimi, and Ria. Ria uses the data collected between her and Yasuke and explains to Nobuaki the cause of the deaths was hypnosis from a computer virus linked to the king's game, taking the power of suggestion to the extreme. It was so extreme, the body killed its own cells. A bacterial virus did the same thing to Yonaki village, but evolved into digital form, which would then be transmitted through text messages and continued to spread. How it evolved into that is unknown, but it is unlikely it could have done so without help. Ria developed an antivirus that could eliminate all the kings in the network by taking advantage of a bug in the program. She attempts to delete the virus, but is punished for attempting to stop the game. The bug itself was a trap set by the king. Before she dies, she tells Nobuaki she left behind a little insurance in case she lost. Nobuaki and Chimi are the only ones left. Meanwhile, in present time, Mizuki gets a new phone and Nobuaki, Kenta, and her finally arrive at the bricked-up gate of Yonaki village. While exploring Yonaki village, now a decrepit ghost town, a house with the name Honda catches Nobuaki's eye, and he goes in while Kenta and Mizuki wait outside. He discovers a few notes from what appears to be Chimi's father and a picture with both the name Chimi and Natsuko. He deduces Chimi and Natsuko were sisters and their father is connected to the king's game, and from Natsuko's actions earlier, she may have also been a survivor of a king's game. Meanwhile, Mizuki experiences significant inner turmoil about whom to text die to, eventually deciding to text it to herself. She declares her love for Kenta, and that by sending those texts, they would die and be together forever. Angry about Mizuki's lack of resolve to live, Kenta knocks her out and sends the text to himself and Natsuko instead on her phone. Nobuaki finds them, and they realize the text didn't work because they were not sent from Mizuki's original phone, so Mizuki and Kenta both end up dying. Then Nobuaki gets a call from Natsuko on his own stolen phone, raping Teruaki while mocking Nobuaki of their deaths. Teruaki tries to call someone for help but Natsuko catches him and takes his phone too. Nobuaki finds hints from a notebook indicating that the characters appearing in the king's victims' phones is a bug and that mutation is a likely way to end the game. He rushes back to his hometown to share information after suddenly getting a call from classmate Ryona Matsumoto who was doing research about the king's game. Ryona reveals she knows about Natsuko's late classmate Ria, who was also collecting the characters from the victims. The message Ria spelled out was those who have hope. They were remarkably similar to the ones Ryona saw Natsuko looking at after Yuichi died and may spell the same message. Natsuko gathers everybody at Bunko Park for the next order, where the class takes turns by seed order to break their fingers. The right fingers are worth +1 point each and left fingers -1 each, with the option to pass. At the end of the game, anyone with a negative point total is punished. Natsuko intends to use this to kill Nobuaki, but everyone passes. Then it is Teruaki's turn and he breaks one finger on his right hand and his entire left hand, giving Natsuko -5. Teruaki threatens to assign -5 points to Natsuko unless gives back their phones. She does so but Teruaki assigns +1 to Nobuaki, -4 to Natsuko, and -1 to her best friend Amy. Natsuko passes rather than break her hand. The negative point to Amy was a test Amy asked for to see if Natsuko would break a finger to save her, as Teruaki did to save Natsuko, which Natsuko failed. Everyone else passes and Amy is the last person to take a turn. She is reluctant to break her entire hand to save herself and Natsuko. Natsuko coerces Amy to think about when she has helped her in the past, and when that fails, tackles Amy and pins her hand to the ground, crushing her entire right hand to save herself. Amy defends Natsuko was just scared and they were still friends, giving Natsuko +4 and herself +1. Later, Nobuaki again convinces everyone to stick together to survive, but is dismissed by Natsuko insisting there can only be one survivor like in the previous King's games. Teruaki is punished because Natsuko blocked the King's message while she had his phone, punishment for his defiance of her, and he dies. The remaining 10 students are given an order to race to Mount Nugakubai, where every 8 hours the person farthest away gets punished. While Natsuko leaves everyone behind in the dust, Nobuaki repeatedly goes out of his way to help his classmates who are falling behind, despite them insisting multiple times that they don't need to be saved, insisting he could not bear to see anyone die anymore. His efforts wins him up amongst the students in last place, with Ryona who lacks stamina and Masatoshi who got shoved down a flight of stairs by classmate Takuya. He also appears to have pushed himself to the limit as he begins to hallucinate. As they are running along the ocean, an exhausted Masatoshi becomes unconscious and falls off a bridge into the ocean. Nobuaki follows to save him but fails to do so and Masatoshi drowns. Riona then warms him up and Nobuaki regains his resolve to continue. As the 8-hour mark is imminent, Nobuaki deliberately stops to tie his shoelace, just as a death punishment text gets sent. It turns out the punishment text was for Masatoshi. Riona is furious at Nobuaki for his insensitivity. After 8 more hours, however, Nobuaki tries the same trick by running the opposite direction. But the text was instead sent for Amy, who was grateful for Nobuaki's earlier actions and sacrificed herself by running the opposite way. Nobuaki reveals to Riona the conclusion of his first King's game, where he and Chimi were given an order to kill the person they loved the most, and Chimi had killed herself for Nobuaki to survive, and Nobuaki got a text from the king with the choice to either continue the game or get punished. Meanwhile, Natsuko reaches the summit first and uses various tactics to deter her incoming classmates Takuya, Yuuna, and Rina, resulting in their deaths. Nobuaki and Riona catch up with Ryu and Aya, and within minutes before the 8-hour mark, approach the summit, but Natsuko stands in the way. With just 5 students remaining, can Nobuaki put a stop to the murderous King's game once and for all? The gang overpowers Natsuko and reach the summit, just as they get their next order to cut their body parts to make a human doll. Ryu offers to sacrifice first, so Natsuko helps him cut his leg using a chainsaw. Seeing Ryu dead, Aya tries to strangle Natsuko, but Natsuko just cuts her body off with her chainsaw. With only Nobuaki, Riona, and Natsuko remaining, they finally calm down to brainstorm how to end the game once and for all. They combine the one-letter texts from the dead classmates and finally discover the truth about the King's game. It is, in fact, an apocalyptic virus type of game that will never end unless every player dies. If there is a survivor, the virus is carried on by them and the game will continue until all of humanity is destroyed. The King's game let Nobuaki survive his first game despite saying he would be punished because it needed a carrier. Natsuko tries to kill Nobuaki by strangling him for confirming her suspicions of false hope, but Riona attacks her with the chainsaw and fatally wounds her. With Natsuko seemingly dead, Riona begins declaring her love for Nobuaki, but using the last of her breath, Natsuko kills Nobuaki with the chainsaw, claiming she loved him first and refusing to let Riona take him. In the afterlife, Nobuaki is reunited with Chimi and his other dead friends, who had waited for him. As the only survivor, Riona drags Nobuaki's corpse to the beach and commits suicide by drowning herself with Nobuaki's dead body. In the epilogue, somewhere in Japan, a random student gets a text from the king saying the King's game has begun once again. This is the end of the video, so please watching all of my anime recap series. Thanks for watching.